This is chapter one of Todaro and Smith, and this is talking about the economic institutions and development, global perspective. So we'll start by asking ourselves the question that what do we mean by development, right? So there are certain traditional economic measures which are going to define what development is. So, for example, if there is an increase in GNP by 5%, 7% or more, then we say that yes, there is development. This is a traditional measure, right? So if there is an increase in income, increase in output, we say that there is development which is going on. But then they moved one step further and they said this no, increase in per capita income is the measure of development. So how per capita income is going to increase? Per capita income is going to increase when the rate of increase in output or rate of increase in income is going to be more than rate of increase in population, right? But then they said something else. They said this that uh, also not only this, by development we would mean that generally the societies were agricultural in nature. And if you look at the developed countries, then those agricultural economies, they transformed themselves. There were structural changes in those economies, and they transformed themselves into manufacturing and the services economy. So by development, you also mean this, that there is an increase in, sorry, there is a shift in the economy from agriculture to manufacturing and services, right? And but you know what? Development traditionally was mainly concerned with an increase in income. So if there is an increase in income, it was assumed that all other things will be taken care of. But you have to ask yourself the question: is it really true that all other things were really taken care of? No, it was. It is not. Just by an increase in income, do you really think that unemployment has reduced, poverty has reduced, income inequality has reduced? No, right? So this was the traditional view. What about the new view on development? So you have to understand one thing. Tadaro says this that if you look at 60s and 70s, 1960s, 1970s, you will find this that many of the developing countries, they were growing well. They were experiencing increase in per capita income, right? But at the same time, in these economies, there was widespread poverty, there was widespread unemployment, there was huge income inequality. Uh, so, on the one hand, their incomes were increasing, but maybe the benefits of that increased income was not passed on to the masses, right? In 1980s, the same developing economies which were developing in terms of income, quote unquote, their incomes also have started falling. They started experiencing lower growth rate of income. When they started experiencing lower growth rate of income, then these governments said this, now though we don't have any income, why should we be spending on social welfare programs? Social welfare programs mean what? Poverty reduction programs, employment generation program, these social programs. So one, poor people were not getting any share of or not much share of the increase in income. Second, now you are giving this defense that because you're experiencing fall in income, you're not going to spend on the social welfare programs, right? So then what was there that Todaro says this that you have to understand one thing, that if you look at poverty, if you look at this development, it is a multi-dimensional process. It does not only include increase in income, it also includes changes in the social structures, right? You should not have a very rigid caste-based society. It includes social inclusion, right? Then it includes popular attitudes, national institutions. It includes acceleration of economic growth, right? At the same time, there should be eradication of poverty. At the same time, there should be decrease in unemployment. At the same time, there should be decrease in income inequality. So they say that this all of this is what development is, not just increase in income, not just per capita increase in income. Because he says this that there can be cases, we can have examples in which there were growth in the economy, but the benefits of growth have not trickled down to the lowest strata, right? Benefits of growth have not trickled down to the lowest strata. And then they say this that if you look at Sain's capability approach, you will find something very different. What is that? Sain says this that do not consider economic growth as an end itself. It is not. It is not. Uh, you have to understand there are people living in your country. By development, you mean what? You just stuff income in their pockets. By development means there should be increase in well-being of the society. Uh, they should have more freedoms. They should enjoy more freedoms. It doesn't just mean to have more income. There can be a dictatorship in the country where everyone might be having a lot of money, but are they really happy? Do they really have all the freedoms? So that is the question which he's asking. He's saying development does not mean just economic growth. So do not consider economic growth as an end itself. And do not consider it that economic growth will take care of everything else. No, it won't. Right. So it says this that it has to be concerned with enhancing lives of the people. And he argues this that you know what poverty, it cannot be measured even properly by income or utility. You can't just measure poverty just by having income or just by having utility. In you remember in your utility function, how do you write this? You write the consumption of the commodities. You write the sequence of commodities, right? So generally, it means what you have more commodities, you have more utility. It is not necessarily important like that. It is not enough you to have things, but what you can do with those things, what you can become with those things, what you do with those things, that is important. So this line, things which person has or feelings, these things provide do not matter. Just by having things, it is not important. It is not enough. But what a person is, what a person can do or actually do with these things, that is important. I can have a bicycle, but I don't know how to ride a bicycle. How it is going to help me? It is not going to help me, right? So that is the point which he is making. And then he says this that it doesn't matter what kind of commodities per people have, or what commodities people have, right? Or what commodities people can consume. What is important is that what he actually does with these commodities, how he uses these commodities. So you can give a book to an illiterate person, it won't be of any use to him. So he has the commodity, he can use it also, maybe as a cooking fuel, but he can't read it, right? So that is the point he is making. So this is what he calls as functionings. So what are functionings? What a person do, or he what person can do, or what he does with the commodities of given characteristics that they came to possess or control. So whatever commodities I have, how I am going to make use of them, that is important. It is not important just to have commodities, it won't help. So freedom of choice or control of one's life is central to understanding of well-being. What kind of life we would want, where we have just three paths to go: path A, path B, path C. No, I should have a freedom of picking up whichever path I want. I should have freedom of picking up any commodity I want, right? Or if I do not have money right now, I should have a freedom to earn money in any way, in legal way, of course, and get that commodity and use that commodity for my well-being. So this word freedom is important. Just having commodities is not enough. What is also important is that what you do with these commodities, right? Uh, what kind of choices these commodities will give you. This freedom of choice, are these commodities giving you that freedom of choice or control? That is what it is. That is going to help you, right? That is going to help you. And then they say you can have functionings also can be of different kinds. One of the kind of functioning could be elementary functioning. So elementary functionings are, for example, I should be adequately nourished. So that is a use which I am getting from having several things. I should be adequately nourished. I should be free from some kind of avoidable disease. These are simple functions. So I have several things with me. I can use these things simply to have adequate nutrition. That's a functioning. There can be complex functioning also. So complex functioning is that I might have these commodities with me, but how these commodities are going to help me in taking part in the community, how these commodities are going to help me in having self respect, right? So that is a complex function. So there are various things attached to it. And then you have, he says this, that there are different sources of disparity between real income and the actual advantages. So he gives a very good example. He says this, that there are five sources of disparity, which is between real income and actual advantages, right? For example, personal heterogeneities. I might have income, but maybe I'm disabled. So am I really enjoying that income? I might have income, but I'm ill. I might have income, but I'm very old to enjoy that income. Uh, Environmental diversities, right? For example, heating and clothing requirements in the cold. So do you have such an income which is going to uh, keep you warm in cold, right? Environmental diversities. So do you really have that much of income that you can get that actual advantage of having a warm home in the cold weather or cool home in the hot weather? Then variations in social climate. I might have income, but if I'm living in a country in which there is a lot of crime, what use it will have? Differences in relational objectives. Think about it. There can be few developed countries. So you just imagine somebody who is poor in US and somebody who is poor in India. There is a stark difference between the two, right? Uh, Poor in US might be equivalent to very low middle class in India, right? Maybe I'm just giving an example. You to think that you are poor relative to the society in which you are living in. So in US, you will be poor if you do not have certain commodities with you. Oh, you don't have phone, you are poor. Oh, you don't go to school, you might be you are poor, and so on. So there are various things, right? They are poor even here, but relatively you will be more poor there, like that. So the same person, if he comes to India, he might be less poor, you can say. So that is what I'm trying to tell you. Uh, Distribution within the family. Think about it. Uh, don't you think that girls, I mean, say for example, a particular family might have things, might have commodities which people can enjoy. But don't you think girls in the same family, they get less medical attention, they get less education than boys? They do, right? They do, right? So that is, I mean, these are the differences. You can have income, but are you making an advantage of that? So that is there. Then you have, uh, they say this, that even if you look at the real income levels, or if you look at the level of consumption of the specific commodities, you cannot have a sufficient measure of well being. What do you mean by this? You mean by this. Just imagine Soviet Union. You may have different commodities. People don't want them, right? You do not have those commodities which people want. You have those commodities which state think people should want. There is a difference. No? Then one may have income, but certain commodities essential for well-being, such as nutritious food, may be unavailable. Maybe you're living in living in a country like Syria, right? You may have income somehow, I don't know how, but you may not have nutritious food. What will you do with that income? That is the point. Uh, then this is the meaning of, you look at the real income level. So if you look at the real income level of that person who is living in Syria, you will say, oh, he's developed. But what kind of development is that? He cannot even afford, he cannot have nutritious food, because in his entire country there is no nutritious food. That is the point, right? They say this. So there is a difference between the countries also, in terms of, he gives you one more example. Even if you um, control this fact that, okay, two countries might have the similar level of calories which we are going to provide in a staple diet, right? But what can also happen is that the availability of these staple foods, for example potatoes, bread, rice, etc., it will differ in nutritional content from one country to another. That is also one of the examples, right? And then they make a very good point. He says this, that Sain stresses this. I'll give you an example. Just imagine a person who is very, very poor. Just imagine that. He might have a huge utility from a very simple thing which we might not even consider. So if there's a cool breeze which is flowing in a hot weather in Delhi, let's say, then that person who is very poor, he might get extremely high utility from that. We might not even consider it. Why am I telling you this right now? I'm telling you this because Professor Sain says that even if you take into account the utility, then this person has very high utility because he is having happiness from that breeze. You may not have it. So if you ask him, are you happy? Yes, you are happy. Why? He doesn't even have any income, nothing, but he's happy. So even if you have utility measures, you can't actually say who is happy and who is not. What kind of well being is that? That is what he is questioning. Even if I know, so what the point which he is putting again and again is that even if you know the income levels, even if you know the utility levels, you may not be able to tell that what is the well-being of the person. He gives a very good example here. So just imagine this: the person doesn't have any income, but he might have very high utility. A person might have every amount of income, he may have no utility because he's very ill. Are you with me? So this is the point which he's making. And then Uh, Sen defines capabilities. So he says that as the freedom that a person has in terms of the choice of functions, right? Uh, given his personal features and his command over commodities, right? Uh, so he tells this that this is this is main thing why development economists, they put a lot of emphasis on education and health, because if you have education and health, then only that income is going to be helpful to you. Just by having more income, no country can be called as just developed, right? They should have freedoms, they should have education, they should have health, right? So that is the reason development economies, they stress upon this, that governments, they should ensure that not only incomes are rising, but also their health is improving, their education is improving, they are given more freedoms. It's a very gist of capability approach also. So you have to read up the chapter definitely. I think I'll take one more day to complete the chapter, one more recording, and so you have to read up this. You can write these notes, and but also include your own points and the points which your professor is going to teach you in the class. So also include that. So don't consider them to be the only thing which you have to do. Right? I hope it was useful to you. Thank you for that.